The avoidant remains silent through all your attempts at connection, maintains distance through every effort you make to bridge it, demonstrates complete disinterest while you invest everything in trying to make the relationship work. You communicate your needs and receive withdrawal. You express your feelings and encounter defensive coldness. You offer patience and understanding, and watch them use that patience to remain emotionally unavailable indefinitely. You finally exhaust yourself trying to sustain connection with someone who cannot or will not meet you adequately, and you make the painful decision to genuinely release them and redirect your life toward healing and growth. You stop checking whether they have reached out. You cease organizing your choices around what they might think or whether they might notice. You invest your energy in building life that feels satisfying, independent of their presence or validation. Months pass. You begin dating someone new who can actually show up consistently. You develop friendships that nourish rather than deplete you. You pursue goals that genuine engagement rather than serving as distraction from relationship pain. You reach a point where thinking about the avoidant generates neither longing nor bitterness, but rather neutral recognition that the relationship was a chapter that has closed. You have genuinely moved on in ways that are visible in your energy, your choices, your contentment. Then they return. The avoidant, who could not be bothered to send single text while you were invested, suddenly reaches out with carefully crafted message. The avoidant, who withdrew from every attempt at intimacy, suddenly wants to talk, to explain, to explore whether reconnection might be possible. The avoidant, who appeared completely indifferent to losing you, suddenly seems intensely interested in your life, your well-being, your current relationship status. This pattern repeats with such consistency that it appears almost universal. Avoidants return precisely when you have stopped waiting for them, exactly when you have built life that no longer includes space for their defended limitations, specifically when you have become genuinely unavailable in ways that mirror the unavailability they demonstrated throughout the relationship. They sense the energetic shift when you genuinely release them. The avoidant operates with highly attuned sensitivity to others' emotional investment in them, despite their defended presentation suggesting they barely notice others' feelings. This sensitivity developed a survival mechanism in the avoidant's early attachment experiences, teaching them to constantly monitor others' emotional states to protect themselves from engulfment or abandonment. The avoidant can detect subtle shifts in how much emotional energy someone directs toward them, can sense when someone's investment increases or decreases, can feel the quality of others' attention, even when that attention is not explicitly expressed. This unconscious monitoring operates continuously beneath the avoidant's defended awareness. Throughout the relationship and during the period immediately following its end, the avoidant unconsciously tracks your emotional investment in them. They sense when you are thinking about them frequently, when you are organizing your life around hope for reconciliation, when your emotional energy remains directed toward them despite the relationship's end. This awareness that you remain invested, that you continue caring, that you have not fully released them, creates subtle sense of security for the avoidant. They know unconsciously that you remain accessible, that the door stays open, that they maintain option to return if they ever choose to do so. This unconscious security allows the avoidant to maintain their defended position without anxiety about permanent loss. When you genuinely move on, when you complete the internal work of releasing them and redirecting your emotional energy toward your own life, the avoidant senses this shift with remarkable accuracy despite having no direct contact with you. The energetic quality of your investment in them changes fundamentally. You stop sending subtle signals through mutual contacts, through activity they can observe, through the energetic frequency of continued attachment, that you remain emotionally oriented toward them. The avoidant perceives this shift as distinct change in the relational field between you, experiencing your release as sudden absence of something they had become accustomed to feeling, even while maintaining distance. This energetic shift triggers alarm in the avoidance attachment system precisely because it signals that the safety net of your continued investment has disappeared. While you remained invested, the avoidant could maintain defended position, knowing unconsciously that connection remained possible through your continued orientation toward them. When you genuinely release them, when your energy redirects away from them entirely, The avoidant experiences this as fundamental change in their psychological security. The option they took for granted, the ability to return to connection whenever they might choose, suddenly appears threatened by your release. The avoidant senses that you are no longer holding space for them, no longer maintaining energetic availability that made their defended distance feel safe. The avoidant's sensitivity to this energetic shift operates below their conscious awareness initially. They do not think consciously, "This person has released me and I need to act." Instead, they experience vague discomfort, undefined sense that something has changed, increasing thoughts about you that seem to arise without clear cause. The avoidant finds themselves thinking about you more frequently, wondering how you are doing, feeling impulses to reach out that they initially suppress, but that return with greater intensity. The avoidant does not connect these experiences to your energetic release. They simply experience increasing psychological pressure that eventually manifests as desire to make contact. The energetic quality of genuine release differs entirely from strategic distance or performed moving on. When you strategically create distance while remaining emotionally invested, when you perform moving on while secretly hoping they will notice, the avoidant senses the continued investment beneath your performed release. They unconsciously recognize that you remain oriented toward them, that your distance is tactic rather than authentic shift, that you still care in ways that maintain their sense of security about your availability. This perceived continued investment allows the avoidant to maintain their distance comfortably because they sense unconsciously that you have not actually released them. Genuine release carries entirely different energetic signature that the avoidant cannot mistake for strategic distance once they sense it. When you authentically release them, when you genuinely redirect your emotional investment away from them and toward your own life. When you reach internal state where they truly no longer occupy significant space in your emotional world, this shift in your energetic orientation registers in the avoidant's unconscious awareness as real rather than performed. The avoidant senses that you have actually let go, that you are no longer holding energetic space for them, that your orientation has fundamentally shifted in ways that threaten their unconscious security about your availability. This sensing of genuine release activates the avoidance attachment system in ways your continued investment never could. While you remained invested, your attachment to them felt safe to dismiss because they knew unconsciously that you would remain available. When they sense you have genuinely released them, when they perceive that your energetic orientation has shifted away from them, their attachment system registers this as potential permanent loss rather than as manageable distance. The avoidance defenses organized around managing others' pursuit, not around managing others' genuine release. The energetic shift of your moving on triggers responses the avoidance defensive structure has no practice mechanisms for managing. Understanding how the avoidant senses your energetic shift requires recognizing that genuine internal release creates changes in your behavior, your energy, your orientation that register in others' awareness, even without direct contact. You stop checking their activities, stop wondering what they are doing, stop organizing choices around what they might think. You engage with life from a place of genuine investment in your own experience, rather than from defended position, where part of your awareness remains oriented toward them. This shift in your energetic investment, while invisible in many ways, creates palpable change that the avoidant's highly attuned sensitivity to others' emotional investment detects with accuracy that would surprise them if they consciously recognized it. Your moving on eliminates the pressure that triggered their withdrawal. The avoidance withdrawal throughout the relationship was not primarily response to specific behaviors you displayed, but rather was defensive reaction to the pressure they experienced from your continued investment, from your desire for greater intimacy, from your expectation that the relationship would deepen and develop. The avoidant interpreted your investment as pressure, even when you expressed that investment gently, experienced your desire for closeness as threat, even when you communicated that desire respectfully, felt your expectations as suffocating even when those expectations represented basic relationship requirements. the avoidance nervous system registered your continued emotional presence as danger requiring defensive withdrawal, regardless of how carefully you modulated your approach. This pressure the avoidant experienced stemmed not from your actual behavior, but from your continued attachment and investment, creating implicit expectation that the avoidant should reciprocate, should increase their availability, should develop greater capacity for intimacy. Even when you never explicitly demanded these things, your continued presence and investment communicated that you hoped for them, that you believed in the avoidant's potential to provide them, that you were waiting for the relationship to evolve into greater mutual engagement. The avoidance defensive structure interpreted this hope and investment as pressure that triggered withdrawal designed to create the distance their nervous system required to feel safe from intimacy's demands. When you genuinely move on, when you release your investment in the avoidant and redirect your energy toward your own life, you eliminate the pressure that triggered their defensive withdrawal. You are no longer hoping they will change, no longer investing in their potential, no longer waiting for the relationship to develop into something more substantial. Your release communicates clearly that you have accepted them exactly as they are, while simultaneously accepting that who they are cannot meet your needs. This acceptance, without continued investment, removes the implicit expectation that the avoidant experienced as threatening throughout the relationship. The avoidant senses this elimination of pressure as profound relief that paradoxically creates space for feelings the pressure prevented them from accessing. While you remained invested, the avoidance nervous system remained in defended alert state, constantly monitoring for signs that intimacy expectations were increasing, perpetually prepared to create distance if your investment threatened to translate into demands for greater closeness. This hypervigilance prevented the avoidant from relaxing enough to access their own feelings about you, their own desires for connection, their own attachment that existed beneath their defended withdrawal. The defensive structure required so much psychological energy to maintain against your continued investment that the avoidant had no resources available to examine their own authentic feelings. When you move on and the pressure disappears, when you no longer represent threat to the avoidant's defended position, their nervous system can finally downregulate from the defensive alert state that your investment maintained. This downregulation creates psychological space where the avoidant can begin accessing feelings that the defensive pressure prevented them from recognizing. The avoidant discovers that without pressure to reciprocate your investment, without expectation to meet your needs, without implicit demand to develop greater intimacy capacity, they can feel their own desire for connection with you. The feelings were always present beneath the defensive structure, but the pressure of your investment kept the defenses so activated that the feelings remained inaccessible. This dynamic creates cruel irony, where the avoidant can only access their attachment to you after you have released your attachment to them. While you wanted them, while you invested in the relationship, while you hoped for their greater presence, the avoidance defenses remain so activated by the pressure of your want that they could not access or express their own want. Only when you stop wanting them, only when you release your investment, only when you eliminate the pressure of your continued attachment, can the avoidance defenses relax enough for them to recognize that they want you. The avoidant discovers their desire for connection precisely when connection is no longer available, because your investment was simultaneously what they needed and what prevented them from being able to receive it. The elimination of pressure also allows the avoidant to romanticize the relationship in ways that were impossible while the relationship existed. During the relationship, the avoidant focused on what felt uncomfortable. Your needs felt like pressure, your vulnerability felt like burden, your desire for closeness felt like threat. These defensive interpretations prevented the avoidant from recognizing or valuing what you actually offered. When you move on and pressure disappears, the avoidant can finally recognize the positive aspects of the relationship without the defensive filtering that characterized their experience while you remained invested. They remember your patience, your understanding, your care, without experiencing those qualities through defensive lens that translated them into pressure and threat. Understanding why pressure elimination triggers the avoidance return requires recognizing that the avoidance defensive structure operates reactively rather than from authentic desire. While you remained invested, The avoidance psychology organized around defending against your investment rather than around examining their own feelings. Your investment created the pressure that activated their defenses, and those activated defenses prevented them from accessing the very feelings of attachment and desire that might have allowed them to meet you adequately. Only when you release your investment, only when you remove the pressure by genuinely moving on, can the avoidance defenses relax enough for them to discover that they actually feel attachment to you, that their defensive structure prevented them from recognizing or expressing, while that attachment could have mattered to sustaining the relationship. They finally feel safe to want you when you no longer want them. The avoidant's deepest psychological terror involves being needed by someone they have allowed to become important to them, being depended upon by someone they care about, being responsible for another person's emotional well-being when they doubt their capacity to provide consistent presence. This terror stems from early attachment wounds where the avoidant learned that being needed led to overwhelming pressure, that others' dependence created unbearable obligation, that mattering to someone meant eventually disappointing them and experiencing the shame of that failure. The avoidant's defensive structure organized specifically around preventing these feared outcomes by maintaining distance that ensures no one can truly need them, no one can genuinely depend on them, no one's well-being hinges on their consistent presence. Throughout the relationship, your investment in the avoidant communicated clearly that you needed them, that their presence mattered significantly to your well-being, that you depended on them for emotional support and connection. This awareness that you needed them triggered the avoidant's core terror. The avoidant sensed that your needs created vulnerability for them. If they allowed themselves to care about meeting your needs, they would face the overwhelming responsibility of consistent presence they doubted they could sustain. If they acknowledged that you depended on them, they would eventually face the shame of disappointing you when their defended limitations prevented adequate reciprocation. Your need for them, while natural and reasonable, activated their deepest fear and drove their defensive withdrawal. When you genuinely move on, when you release your need for them and demonstrate through your thriving that your well-being no longer depends on their presence, you eliminate the trigger for the avoidance core terror. You are no longer needing them, no longer depending on them, no longer requiring their consistent presence for your emotional stability. This shift from you needing them to you being completely self-sufficient creates psychological safety. The avoidant never experienced during the relationship. The avoidant recognizes that you do not need them, that your well-being exists independent of their presence, that they bear no responsibility for your emotional state. This elimination of need eliminates the terror that drove their withdrawal. The cruel paradox emerges. Only when you stop needing the avoidant can they feel safe enough to want you. While you needed them, your need felt like unbearable pressure that activated all their defenses against intimacy's obligations. When you no longer need them, when you demonstrate complete self-sufficiency, the avoidant can finally access their own desire for connection without that desire carrying the terrifying weight of responsibility for meeting your needs. The avoidant discovers they want connection with you precisely when that connection would cost them nothing in terms of obligation, when they could have relationship with you without bearing responsibility for your well-being, when wanting you would not translate into the overwhelming pressure of being needed. This safety to want you when you do not want them also relates to the avoidant's fear of being trapped or engulfed by intimacy. While you remained invested, the avoidant interpreted your investment as creating potential trap, where increasing intimacy would lead to increasing expectations, where allowing connection to deepen would result in demands for even greater closeness, where each step toward you would make it harder to maintain the defended distance their nervous system requires for safety. Your investment represented slippery slope toward the engulfment. The avoidant organized their life around preventing. The avoidant could not allow themselves to want you because wanting you meant starting down a path that would eventually threaten their defended autonomy. When you move on and clearly demonstrate that you no longer want them, the avoidant can want you without fearing the trap. Your lack of investment communicates that connection with you would not lead to increasing demands, that wanting you would not start the dreaded progression toward engulfment, that they could desire connection without that desire creating the obligations and expectations they find overwhelming. The avoidant feels safe to experience and even express their want, precisely because your lack of want means that want cannot trap them in deepening intimacy that would eventually exceed their defended capacity. The timing of the avoidance return also relates to their need to feel in control of intimacy's progression. While you wanted them and pursued them, the avoidant experienced themselves as reactive party defending against your desires rather than as active party choosing connection from place of authentic want. The avoidance defenses organized around managing your pursuit rather than around examining their own desires. This reactive position prevented the avoidant from ever accessing authentic choice about whether they wanted intimate connection with you. When you move on and remove the pressure of your pursuit, the avoidant finally experiences space to choose rather than to react. They can reach out from place of their own desire rather than from place of managing yours, and this sense of being the choosing party rather than the pursued party feels safe in ways that being pursued never could. The avoidance return after you move on also reflects their need for relationship to feel optional rather than necessary. While you remained invested, the relationship felt necessary in ways that triggered the avoidance defenses. Necessary to meet your needs, necessary to prevent your pain, necessary because your investment created implicit obligation. The avoidant could not tolerate the relationship feeling necessary because necessity feels like trap that prevents the autonomy their defensive structure requires. When you move on and the relationship becomes genuinely optional, when the avoidant recognizes that you neither need nor expect their presence, they can finally allow themselves to want connection that no longer feels like obligation or trap, but rather feels like authentic choice they can make or unmake without consequence to your well-being. Understanding why the avoidant feels safe to want you only after you stop wanting them requires recognizing that the avoidance defensive structure inverts the normal relationship between safety and intimacy. Secure people feel safe to want others who want them, feel comfortable pursuing connection with people who welcome that pursuit, experience mutual desire as foundation for intimate relationship. The avoidance defended psychology operates opposite. They can only feel safe to want when they are not wanted, can only access desire when that desire creates no obligation, can only pursue when pursuit will not be enthusiastically received in ways that would deepen intimacy beyond their defended capacity. Your moving on creates the only conditions where the avoidant can safely want you. Conditions where that want costs them nothing, obligates them to nothing, and can be withdrawn at any moment without harming you because you no longer need or want their presence anyway. Your thriving triggers their comparison and regret. The avoidant who maintained distance while you remained invested could tell themselves comforting narratives about the relationship's end, that you were too needy and they were right to prioritize their defended autonomy, that you wanted too much and they were justified in refusing to meet unreasonable demands, that the relationship's failure reflected incompatibility rather than their own limitations. These defensive narratives allowed the avoidant to minimize their loss, to avoid confronting what their patterns cost them, to maintain ego investment in having made wise choice by remaining defended rather than risking vulnerable intimacy. The avoidant could sustain these narratives as long as your post-relationship state appeared to confirm them, if you struggled after the relationship ended, if you appeared diminished by the loss, if your life seemed less satisfying without them. When you genuinely move on and begin visibly thriving, when you demonstrate happiness and fulfillment that clearly exceeds what you experienced during the relationship, when you build life that appears richer and more satisfying than what existed while you were trying to maintain connection with them, you destroy every defensive narrative the avoidant used to justify their patterns and minimize their loss. Your thriving proves that you were not too needy, but rather that their emotional unavailability was depleting you. Your visible happiness demonstrates that you were not asking for too much, but rather that accepting their insufficient offerings was costing you access to your own well-being. Your flourishing confirms that the relationship's failure reflected their limitations rather than any fundamental incompatibility. This destruction of defensive narratives forces the avoidant to see the relationship and themselves through entirely different lens. The avoidant must confront that you are not the problem they needed to escape, but rather were a valuable person they lost through their defended limitations. The avoidant faces that your needs were not excessive demands, but rather reasonable requirements for healthy partnership that they could not meet. The avoidant recognizes that their defended position did not protect them from bad relationship, but rather prevented them from adequately participating in relationship with someone who possessed capacity for genuine intimacy they lacked. Your thriving becomes mirror reflecting the avoidant's limitations back to them in ways they cannot dismiss or rationalize. Your visible flourishing also triggers acute comparison between your post-relationship trajectory and the avoidant's own experience. The avoidant observes you building satisfying life, developing meaningful connections, demonstrating joy and vitality that contrasts sharply with the avoidant's own continued defended isolation. The avoidant faces that you moved forward into expansion while they remained stuck in contraction, that you grew while they stagnated, that you found fulfillment while they continued the defended patterns that destroyed the relationship. This comparison forces uncomfortable recognition that your capacity exceeds theirs, that you possess relational and emotional resources they lack, that you are thriving precisely because you are no longer constrained by relationship with someone whose defended limitations prevented mutual flourishing. The regret the avoidant experiences stems specifically from recognition of opportunity cost that your thriving makes undeniable. The avoidant sees in your current state what the relationship could have been if they had possessed capacity to show up differently, sees concrete manifestation of the life they could have built with you if their defenses had not prevented adequate participation, sees the version of you that blossoms when your needs are met rather than constantly frustrated. Your thriving highlights what the avoidant lost, not just in losing you, but in never adequately receiving what you offered while the relationship existed. The avoidant recognizes they had access to a person capable of this level of vitality and chose defended distance over vulnerable connection with them. Your thriving also activates the avoidant's fear of missing out and their terror of regret. The avoidant observes you apparently happy, potentially with someone new who can provide the consistent presence the avoidant could not offer, building life that looks fulfilling in ways the avoidant's defended isolation never provides. This observation triggers fear that the avoidant made catastrophic error in judgment, that they let go of someone remarkable they will never find again, that they will spend their remaining years regretting their choice to prioritize defended safety over intimate connection with you. The avoidant's imagination torments them with scenarios where you build beautiful life with someone else while they remain alone in defended isolation that provides none of the satisfaction they sacrifice genuine connection to preserve.